Hour with some breaking news. The Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, has spoken to Volodymyr Zelensky this morning and told him that Ukraine is on an irreversible path to NATO. Now, that, of course, directly contradicts both President Trump and his Defence Secretary, Pete Hegseth, who over the past few days have repeatedly ruled out the prospect of Ukraine joining the military alliance. Now,
We're on the road to 10,000 subscribers, and we couldn't have done it without you. Thank you for your incredible support. To celebrate, we're giving away £1,000 to 10 lucky winners, £100 each. Here's how to enter. Subscribe to our channel. Like this post. Drop your postcode in the comments. Once we hit 10,000 subscribers, we'll randomly select the winners. Don't miss your chance to be part of the £1,000 giveaway. Start now, and it could be you. In 2016, Keir Starmer didn't hold back. He slammed Donald Trump, calling him divisive and dangerous. He even went as far as to say he wouldn't invite Trump to his home for dinner. Starmer wasn't alone. His party, including Angela Rayner and Sadiq Khan, openly criticized Trump, painting him as a global threat. It was clear Starmer wanted nothing to do with him.
Of course, I wouldn't want Donald Trump round for dinner, but don't underestimate the danger to the world if Trump is re-elected this time around. I'm anti-Trump. I would like to send my warmest congratulations to President Trump on his inauguration as the 47th President of the United States.
Fast forward to 2024, and suddenly, the tune started to change. After Trump's return to power, Starmer wasn't standing on his moral high ground anymore. Instead, he was shaking hands, exchanging polite words, and, most importantly, trying to secure a working relationship. In September 2024, Starmer met Trump in New York, a moment that would have been unthinkable years ago. The meeting was official, with discussions on trade and security. No public insults, no fiery statements, just the usual diplomatic language. Suddenly, Starmer wasn't the man calling Trump out, he was the one making nice. Why? The reality is simple: politics. The UK can't afford to be on bad terms with the US, especially when dealing with economic struggles and global conflicts. Whether he liked it or not, Starmer had to play the game. But here's the problem: Trump has a long memory. He doesn't forget insults, and he certainly doesn't forgive them easily.
Well, I'm going to see him in about an hour, so I have to be nice, right? But I actually think he's very nice. I think he ran a great race. He did very well. It's very early, but he's popular, and I'll be seeing him, and I'll send you a regard.
So, was Starmer trying to fix things, or was he just desperate to stay relevant? And after everything, did Trump actually buy into Starmer's sudden shift? Well, that answer became clearer when Starmer made a move that completely contradicted Trump's foreign policy, his stance on Ukraine and NATO. Keir Starmer just made a move that's bound to shake up his already shaky relationship with Donald Trump. In a meeting with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in February 2025, Starmer assured him that the UK fully supports Ukraine's irreversible path to NATO. No hesitation, no conditions, just full commitment. This wasn't just a diplomatic nicety, it was a direct message to Russia and a bold statement that Ukraine belongs in the alliance, no matter what.
The suffering that the Ukrainian people have endured is beyond words. Yesterday we saw the American President Donald Trump spend an hour and a half on the phone with Putin. He praised Putin, and all the signs are that he's about to give away Ukrainian land and even potentially sacrifice Ukrainian independence. That's not acceptable, is it?
Well, let's start with the suffering in Ukraine, because it's been a long conflict. It's Russian aggression, and there have been very many casualties, real suffering on the front line, but also suffering in the civilian population. And when I was in Kyiv just a few weeks ago, I saw some of those who've been on the front line in the burns unit of a hospital with terrible life-changing burns, and that really...
But here's the issue: Trump is having none of it. For months, he and his team have repeatedly dismissed the idea of Ukraine joining NATO. Trump's approach is clear: he wants negotiations with Russia, not more confrontation. He sees NATO expansion as a provocation and has made it clear that if Ukraine joins, it could bring unnecessary tensions with Moscow. Trump has even hinted at cutting US support for Ukraine if it continues down this path. So, what happens now? Starmer just put himself in direct opposition to Trump's foreign policy. That's not a small problem, it's a major diplomatic headache. If Trump follows through on his hardline stance, the UK might find itself standing alone, promising NATO membership to Ukraine while the US pulls back. Starmer wants to look like a global leader, but in reality, he's putting the UK in a tight spot. And knowing Trump, he won't let this slide. Starmer just made another enemy move, and it's only a matter of time before Trump fires back.
But him and Donald Trump are competing.
Yeah, I know. Well, we'll come to Mr.
Who's
Trump
the
in a
biggest
moment.
idiot?
We'll come to the president.
He's an absolute buffoon. He has no place in the White House. He's an embarrassment.
Keir Starmer keeps talking about that special relationship with the US, but let's be real, it's looking more fragile by the day. His open support for Ukraine's NATO membership puts him directly at odds with Donald Trump, and that's not something the UK can afford to ignore. The US is Britain's closest ally, but Trump has made it clear he doesn't want Ukraine in NATO and isn't going to throw American support behind leaders who push for it. This isn't just about foreign policy, it's about power dynamics. Starmer is trying to play the role of a strong global leader, but instead, he's walking a tightrope between the US and the EU. He insists the UK doesn't have to pick sides, claiming Britain can maintain strong ties with both. But that's easier said than done. The EU is fully backing Ukraine's NATO bid, while Trump's America is stepping back.
It's sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic, racist. You've returned to that accusation that you made previously. What does that achieve?
Well, no, it's really important that we put out a hand of friendship to President-elect Trump. I wish him well.
You can't have it both ways. You can't call his policies sexist, homophobic, Islamophobic and racist and put out a hand of friendship at the same time.
Well,
or do you think you can?
I think the three things that even Donald Trump supporters would agree with is his policies are protectionist, nativist and unilateralist. I think that poses problems, not just for our great country and the world, but also for London. Now, look, I want our government and our country to continue to have a special relationship with President Trump and the USA. One of the joys about a special relationship is like having a best mate. Our expectations are more for a best mate, our closest ally, than they are of others, and that means sometimes calling out your best mate or your closest ally when you think they're doing things.
So, where does that leave Keir Starmer? In a diplomatic minefield. He risks alienating Trump, who has already proven he's willing to punish allies who don't fall in line. At the same time, he's trying to keep European partners happy, knowing the UK still relies on trade and security ties with the continent. But Trump doesn't do half friendships. If Starmer keeps pushing policies that contradict Trump's agenda, the UK might find itself stuck between a hostile White House and an over-reliant EU, neither of which will do Starmer any favours. Keir Starmer might be sitting in Downing Street, but outside, the criticism is getting louder. From politicians to the public, there's a growing belief that he's damaging the UK's reputation on the world stage. His handling of international relations, especially his stance on Ukraine and his awkward approach to Trump, has left many questioning if he actually has a plan or if he's just making it up as he goes.
And just to be clear, the American Defense Secretary said yesterday, no return to the 2014 borders, no possibility of Ukraine joining membership. No possibility of Ukraine joining NATO. What is your position on that?
Well, my position is the NATO position. This was discussed at the summit that we had last year in Washington, where it was agreed amongst all NATO members that there should be an irreversible path for Ukraine to NATO membership.
And you have backed away from that, to be absolutely clear.
No, obviously nobody was expecting that to be immediate. It was a pathway.
Critics say Keir Starmer is trying too hard to act like a major global leader, but instead, he's making the UK look weak and confused. One moment he's anti-Trump, the next, he's trying to cozy up. Then, he turns around and openly defies Trump's foreign policy on Ukraine. To some, it seems like Starmer is attempting to please everyone and ending up pleasing no one. Even within his own party, whispers of concern are growing. Labour MPs don't want a leader who picks unnecessary fights with the US, especially when Britain needs strong allies. But Starmer isn't backing down. He's sticking to his policies, insisting that the UK must stand firm in its commitments, whether it's supporting Ukraine or maintaining strong EU ties. He's betting that being seen as a principled leader will win over the public. The question is, does the public actually believe him? Because right now, even his supporters are starting to wonder if he's leading with conviction or just walking into one political disaster after another.
But what matters most, I think, is that we stand by Ukraine, we put Ukraine in the strongest possible position, and that we make sure that if there is a cessation of hostilities, if there's an end to the fighting, that any peace which is desperately needed and wanted is just and it is lasting and capable of enduring. And what we don't want to see is simply a pause in the fighting that gives Russia the space and the opportunity to rearm and go again. So any stopping of the fighting.
If there's one man in British politics who Donald Trump actually trusts, it's Nigel Farage. While Keir Starmer stumbles through foreign policy and burns bridges, Farage is making a comeback, louder, sharper, and fully aligned with Trump's vision. Farage has never hidden his admiration for Trump. The two share the same nationalist, anti-globalist outlook and both see Starmer's pro-EU stance as a disaster for Britain. While Starmer tries to juggle relationships with Washington and Brussels, Farage is making it clear Britain needs to be fully independent, tougher on immigration, and ready to put its own interests first. It's a message that echoes Trump's America First philosophy, and it's one that's gaining traction among conservative voters in the UK who feel let down by Starmer's leadership.
And that's why, when President Trump graciously hosted me for dinner at Trump Tower, I told him that we will invest more deeply than ever in this transatlantic bond with our American friends in the years to come.
And then there's Trump's own view. He's not subtle about his preferences. He wants an ally in the UK, not a rival. Reports suggest that behind closed doors, Trump has openly spoken about how Farage would be a much better leader for Britain than Starmer. Unlike Starmer, who Trump sees as weak and unreliable, Farage would be a leader Trump could actually work with. So what happens if Farage gains more political influence? It could completely reshape UK-US relations. If Trump wins a second term and Farage strengthens his position in Britain, Starmer might find himself even more isolated. And knowing Trump, he wouldn't hesitate to ignore Starmer entirely and deal with Farage instead. Keir Starmer is walking a dangerous line, and the cracks in his foreign policy are already starting to show. His open support for Ukraine's NATO bid has put him at odds with Trump, and his balancing act between the US and the EU is getting harder by the day. If these tensions continue, the UK could be forced into making tough choices that will define its global position for years to come.
I that you had a phone call with Keir Starmer yesterday.
I did. I just signed a letter to him. He asked for a meeting, and I agreed to the meeting. We're going to have a friendly meeting. Very good. We have a lot of good things going on. But he asked to come and see me, and I just accepted his asking.
Do you have a date for that, sir? And what do you hope to
Very soon. I think he wants to come next week or the week after.
And what do you hope to discuss?
I don't know. It was his request, not mine. But, I've met him twice already. We get along very well. He's a very nice guy.
One potential shift, a cooling of the so-called special relationship with the US. Trump doesn't forget betrayals, and Starmer's defiance over Ukraine might just be enough to push the UK further down his list of priorities. If Trump follows through on his threats to reduce NATO involvement or cut aid to Ukraine, Britain could find itself shouldering more of the burden alone. Starmer has talked tough, but without strong US backing, his promises to Ukraine might be nothing more than empty words. Then there's the EU factor. Starmer wants closer ties with Europe, but that's a risky game. The UK has spent years trying to prove its post-Brexit independence, and now Starmer is signalling a shift back toward EU influence. Will that make Britain stronger or just leave it trapped between two power blocs, neither of which fully trust him? Starmer's challenge is clear. Can he navigate these tensions without making the UK look weak, or will his missteps leave Britain isolated, with no strong allies and no real strategy for the future?